Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Abdullah Samir Show. Like I said, I don't have a name for it, so I'm just calling it the Abdullah Samir Show. Today, I'm with Mary Delafont. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, you could say it that way. I've told lots of people I made the name up, so it doesn't really have an official pronunciation, but it's Delafont, I guess.
Sounds French.
Yeah.
Yep. So like I said, I'm joined by Mary, and we're going to be talking about her, I don't know if you want to call it escape from fundamentalism, her, transition, her way out, her transformation, like a caterpillar to a butterfly, away from the darkness of religious dogma to the freedom of free thinking. I make it sound so dramatic, don't I?
I know. I'm so excited to find out what happens.
So everyone, this is your friendly neighborhood ex-Muslim. That's my new branding. That's what I'm calling myself. So I'm not Spider-Man, but maybe I am Spider-Man in some ways. So yeah, let's have it. So Millie, how's it going? How are you doing?
Oh, it's really good. I'm doing really good. Just another day ahead of me of fun times talking to random people on YouTube.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about yourself. So you were in a very religious family, was it? And then tell me about that. Like, what was your upbringing?
Yeah, so I was born in 82. So I grew up in the Midwest in Minnesota, white family, evangelical. All the pictures of Jesus in the church are white Jesus. So very much a colonized form of Christianity, and very much the kind that was like, everything is about your personal relationship with God, and you need to believe the right thing. And if you don't, then you're going to go to hell. And if you do, you get to go to heaven forever. And just kind of the run-of-the-mill Christianity, which might not mean a lot for your viewership now that I realize your demographic. But, I think we have some things in common. And then around age 13, the age of reasoning, I suppose, I started questioning things. However, at that time, since the way that they had put the religion into me was in such a way that you never trust yourself. You're told that your heart is evil, that you can't trust your own thoughts and your feelings, and so you're constantly externalizing, looking to some kind of outer source to tell you if you're okay or not. And so when I had those doubts at age 13, I didn't feel safe to explore them. And I was in a bubble. Like, I was in a Christian school. I was in a Christian family. I was going to church twice a week at least. So everyone around me is Christian. And anytime I mentioned or dropped any kind of hint of something that I was struggling with, it was seen as a life and death kind of thing. It was like I informed somebody that's, hey, I think I've chosen to have cancer. What do you think about it? And so that's how people would react.
Was it you were taught that you were inherently sinful, or were you taught that it was the devil that was making you doubt?
Well, so we are inherently sinful. That's part of the doctrine, that you're born sinful. You need to be saved by Jesus. So there is that piece of the doctrine. But when I talked about my doubts with people, some people would interpret it different ways. Some people would be like, God is big enough to handle your doubts. And so it was kind of this more spacious response. But then there were others that were like, those doubts are directly from the devil. Here's the magic words you need to say as you close your eyes to make him go away. And so there's a mix of responses, but nothing was like, interesting, you have a really solid point. There was no space for discussion or exploration of it.
That is interesting, because in Islam, you're not taught that you're inherently sinful. You're taught that you have this fitra, which is this instinct towards believing in God, and then if you go against that, you're going against sort of your nature, right? You're going against what God wants from you, and it's the devil that whispers in your ears, the devil that misguides you, and if you listen to the devil, you are the one that's at fault. And it's not because you're inherently bad in any ways, but just because you shouldn't listen to the devil, you should listen to the prophet or whatever, right? So that's kind of an interesting difference there.
I can see that.
Yeah.
And it varies upon your kind of little demographic of Christianity that you grew up in, what flavor
Yeah.
that
Which
it
one was
was.
yours?
I mean, like Lutheran for the
Okay.
beginning part of it, and then it was something called General Baptist, but like the best encompassing phrase is just evangelical
Oh yeah.
Christianity, which is just, yeah, it's,
Interesting. So you were pretty young to have doubts, 13. I mean,
yeah.
that's
I
like
loved her. I look back now and I saw a commenter who's asking where I stand now. Now I'm an agnostic atheist. I
yeah.
don't have, I have not been presented with sufficient proof of there being a God. And so I remain agnostic on the issue. And therefore, without a belief in a God, I am atheist.
Yeah.
So that's where I stand now. But yeah,
So
at 13, I
yeah,
did start to doubt, which is pretty young.
that's interesting. Like, I'm wondering how that happened because you were surrounded by Christianity everywhere you see. Your parents are Christian, you go to church regularly. How did that happen? Like, how did you end up having doubts?
That's a good, I mean,
Hmm.
actually, now that you ask me, I'm thinking about the first day in high school. So ninth grade, I went to a Christian high school, a Lutheran high school, and every year, 9, 10, 11, 12, you have to take a religion course. Like it's part of the curriculum. And so it was the first day. I didn't know this high school. I didn't know anybody that I was with, any of my co-students. I didn't know any of the teachers. And I show up at first class of the day, religion.
Hmm.
The pastor's leading it, and he does this thing where he's like, he asks us what prayer is. And so we all start talking about what prayer is. And we've all been indoctrinated. We know how to respond. We're saying the things. And he comes back and he's like, yeah, you're right. You can pray to God, and you can pray to trees, and you can pray to grass and the wind. And he kind of goes off on this thing where I had no idea. I was like, what the fuck? What is this? Like, and I didn't know how to respond to him. And in the end, he came out being like, I was testing you. Like, this is what you're going to find in the world around you. You're going to run into people who are going to tell you that you can pray to trees, and you
Yeah.
need to know what you believe, and you need to be ready to defend your faith. And so he was trying to get us more prepared to engage intellectually with these discussions. But all it did for me was like, fuck. Yeah, no, you have a good point. Like, why not all those things? And so, like, I was already kind of starting to doubt at that point.
Oh. So you just
then
had a skeptical mind, I think.
I just do. I have
Yeah.
a skeptical mind, and I just need to be able to ask questions, and I'm not going to just listen to something just because it's trying to strike fear into me. So leaving religion was the scariest thing I ever did, because I said to myself, I am willing to deal with the fear of hell in order to pursue the truth.
You
and
know, that's interesting.
Scary.
That's very interesting because there's a scientific basis to skepticism and belief. Dopamine levels in the brain, for example, people that have higher dopamine levels tend to see more patterns where patterns don't exist, and people that have lower dopamine levels tend to be more skeptical and sometimes even miss patterns that exist in front of them. So they did a study or a test or whatever experiment where they actually were trying to measure this, and they found out that some people are naturally more skeptical than others, and some people are more believers and more likely to be believers, which is interesting because if God wants us to be believers, why would he set it's like the dice are loaded against some of us.
Yeah.
If he's designed us to be skeptical or to be a little bit more, look for more evidence, why would God want people that are blind believers over the people that use reason or want reason and evidence? Does it make sense? I mean, he designed us to like doubt him. It's weird, right?
Yeah.
It's strange. Yeah.
I can't answer that for you, man. That's why I left. There was just too many questions. Like, I just felt like they were claiming way too many things that they couldn't back up. Like, I tried to engage with the apologetics that I was taught, but in the end, I had questions about the answers and questions about words within the answers. And I was like, well, what do you mean by this word? And you just start asking too many questions and they get really upset. And so I was very willing to try to understand things, but you can only ask so many questions before you get pushback to let you know you've gone too far. And I was never comfortable with that. But the fear of hell, and the comfort of knowing that you were right, kept me in there for a long time. And also the messaging that I got about being, deceitful, being dumb, being a shitty human being, not worth anything. Like, those are the kinds of doctrine that I absorbed in Christianity. And so when I started doubting at 13, I didn't feel emotionally free to engage that. And so instead, I doubled down. I kept doubling down, more time at church, more missions, more reading, more everything. I committed after I graduated from high school, I decided to become a missionary. And so in Christianity, that means, what it meant for me is that I moved to Mexico for 2 years, and I worked with an organization called Youth with a Mission, and they teach you a bunch of doctrine for 3 months, and then they have you go out into the field, which is the slums, the very, very, very poorest, most vulnerable people, and perform dances and dramas for them that symbolize that Jesus loves them, and then give them nothing and just emotionally manipulate them into saying magical words so that you can feel better about yourself, about their souls. And that's...
The incentives are all warped there, if you think about it. I mean, people doing this, although I do think, and you can answer this question, I'll ask you the question after. First, I'll tell you what I think. I do think that if you look at the incentives that are set up by this religion, the incentives are that if you don't save this person, they're going to go to hell forever and ever. So theoretically, even if you don't feed them, but you save their soul, you've actually done a better job for them.
That's right.
So from that sort of warped incentive system, you're actually doing a good thing. But like, I want to ask you, don't you find that Christian organizations do a lot of charity work, maybe more than, I don't know, compared to like secular ones or not? I'm sure there's tons of secular organizations. But one good thing I've seen, at least from my perspective, is that Christian organizations, like, for example, in Canada, when they had the whole Syrian refugee crisis, they were like Christian churches that were like bringing people over and settling them in the neighborhood, and the Canadian government worked with the churches to help them. So that's a good thing. And they weren't expecting them to be Christian, as far as I know. I don't think so anyways. Right. So the church does do good things too, right? But
of course. Why? Yeah. I'm not going to stand here and be like, oh, all Christians are fuckfaces. Like this, that's not any kind of thing that I'm trying to say. I though, through my experiences, exercise a lot of caution when analyzing what a Christian or religious group is doing in a community. Like if that organization truly just selflessly, altruistically facilitated the immigration of refugees who needed asylum with no hooks, with no like, here's some literature you're going to need to read before you get to eat today, which is a thing that happens in some organizations. Oh, yeah. If they nixed that out and they were just like, you know what, God is this action, and they believe their action to be God, cool, that's cool. But I have an issue with the emotionally manipulating someone who's in a vulnerable position, which is something I did. Yeah, it's absolutely something I did.
It muddies the waters when you bring religion into the work, which is why I think secular sort of organizations like Engineers Without Borders, Doctors Without Borders, I mean, they're the best because there's no question of religion. They don't care whether you're Christian or Muslim. There's no religious motivation there. It's just to help people, right? And so Greenpeace and, all of these secular organizations, definitely, I think there's a level above. I do think that religion creates this sort of, again, this incentive where, now from Islam, I don't know about from Christianity, but from the Islamic perspective, you're doing a good deed that you're expecting to get something back from it. Like in Islam, any good deed you do, God will pay you back. So you're not really doing a good, I mean, it's still a good deed, but you're not,
It's not altruism.
it's not altruism. It's selfish in a sense, because you're going to get it back. So you don't care. You're like, yeah, I'll just donate $10,000 to the mosque. And people do donate like ridiculous amounts of money. And they're like, I don't care. I'm just going to get it back anyway. So whatever, God's going to give me a better job. Or if he doesn't give me a better job in the next life, I'll be like rewarded or whatever. And that many sins will be forgiven. Is that incentive there as well with Christianity, that if I do this, I'm going to get something back?
It depends which Christianity you're a part of. I think there are some that view it as inherently as transactional, as a general ledger. Like there's literally, God has a general ledger, and here's your debit and here's your credit.
Yeah.
You know, and like it's literally transactional. And there's some forms of Christianity who see it that way. I think the form that I ingested was more like, do this because it's the right thing to do and God wants you to do it. I never really felt like, there were some Christians, ex-Christians that I know who will talk about like how they did these things to earn more crowns in heaven. That's a thing apparently, like that if you do these actions, you get to earn crowns. And I'm like, that sounds like a fun video game, but this is real. But also I want to say that now, being a secular individual, I still don't believe in altruism. I still don't think that's a thing. We benefit from every action that we take, and to think that we don't is lying to ourselves and being disingenuous about what humanity is. And it's okay. It's okay that I get to feel good fuzzies inside when I get to help someone else out. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as other people are being helped, enjoy the outcome of that good fuzziness.
That is I mean, it's true. I mean, we've evolved to be altruistic, right? So we should be encouraging that. That's a good incentive. That's a good intrinsic incentive, right? The problem I have is that religion kind of is almost like it takes over that. And same thing with the survival mechanism, right? Like it teaches you, we've evolved to survive, and so this idea of hell is used against us to kind of override a survival instincts and say, well, you need to survive away from hell too, so you need to do all these things that religion is telling you to do. And I think that's where the incentives get skewed. I'm perfectly fine, when it comes to someone praying or fasting, whatever they want to do, it's like, it's fine if they do it, if they want to do it. But when they're told that they have to do it because if they don't do it, they're going to be punished, now you've kind of, warped the incentives in a way that they're obligated to do it. Like hijab is an example. A Muslim woman is taught that if she doesn't wear a hijab, it's not like an option. It's like it may be an option, like her parents might not beat it. Some parents might compel her, but let's say she's old enough that she's like 19 or 20 and she's in a family that's somewhat liberal and it's okay for her not to wear it according to her parents or whatever. Now, if she doesn't wear it, that's her choice. No one's going to beat it up. But she's taught that she's sinful and she is guilty of, she's basically every day she goes out and men look at her, she's sinful and she's going to be punished for that. She's liable to be punished. Not necessarily punished, but like she's racking up bad deeds every day. So there's this spiritual sort of compulsion that's put on her. And the same thing with praying 5 times a day. Like, I don't care if people want to pray and fast, but like when you're telling them they have to do that or they will go to hell, now you're robbing people of the freedom to choose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, now, of course, in Iran, we're not even talking about Iran and Saudi, and like that's a whole other issue altogether. But we're talking about even in America and Canada, you have, all of these people that are taught that. And I think that's kind of like where you're coming from too, right? Like you were taught all of these things are bad. And so it influenced the decisions in your life. So what happened next? Like you were doubting, you went overseas and you doubled down, like you said. What happened after that?
Well, the funny part is that while I was in Mexico, I continued to doubt. See, that's the thing. When you deny your cognitive dissonance, it doesn't go away. And so despite being in the most extreme spiritual environment that I could find within my religion, I still had doubts, despite the fact I was praying innumerable amounts of times during the day and saving people's souls all day long. I still had doubts. And so after about 2 years, and well, what I wanted to mention there was that for some of the time when I was down there, I was an atheist.
Wow.
Yeah, because I'd already bought my ticket to return back there during this span of time. And while I was waiting to return back, 9/11 happened. And it was right around then that I kind of had another faith crisis, as we call it in Christianity. And I was like, is this even a thing? What the fuck is going on here? And I was like, well, I've already got my ticket to go back to this missionary school. So if there's a God, I guess I should just go down there because he's probably down there. And he's certainly not in my Minnesota white ass, boring, lukewarm house. So I did go back to Mexico as an atheist, but and that particular experience of being in an extreme fundamentalist religious environment while atheist and vulnerable and traumatized is not anything I would wish on anyone. And it was a terrible experience. And in the end, I ended up leaving after a couple of years, moved back to Minnesota. And in that time, in the last 12 years or so, I deconverted within a few years. Within a few years, I was like, I think I'm agnostic. I don't know about all this other stuff anymore. And then a few years after that, I was like, I don't believe in any God at all. So I think I'm also atheist in that sense. But more so, I think people really emphasize the experience of deconversion as being terribly traumatic, which is fair if that's how they phrase it. For me, I feel like the time after I deconverted was the most painful period of my life, because you've taken the entire framework that you've been given, the framework that was taken for granted as a kid. This is how you saw everything, and it was just burned to the ground. And no one that you grew up with understands you anymore. Your parents don't understand you. They can't see you. Your siblings don't understand you, and they can't see you. Everything, every emotional bond was stripped from me. Every thing that I thought that I knew was stripped from me. And so for those 12 years or so following, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, panic, depression, existential dread, eating disorder, suicidal ideation, a lot of pain. And that is religious trauma. That is religious trauma. And so that's been a lot of my life until just a few years ago when I decided, you know what, fuck this. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of all of this shit. And so I made a decision to engage my fear, and I started choosing to do things I was terrified of. And over a period of time, I've found myself. I've found my voice that I'm using, and happy to talk to you. And I've found my grounding on the earth, which is not just a temporary thing. It's not just this little staging area that God made for us to hang out for a little while until we die. It's actually literally our home, and it's been our home for forever. And so this is something I've been going through in the last few years, just this, like, I call it, I don't know if you like this, I call it anthrobiological grounding. It's that transition from thinking you're a spiritual creature, which spiritual can still apply, right? Yeah. But thinking you're exclusively a spiritual creature temporarily on something that is material, into being, I am material. I am part of this material. I'm part of this society. I'm part of this environment. I'm part of this planet. I'm part of this universe, and getting reintegrated and feeling connected to what exists. And that's what I've been kind of going through the last few years. And it's been an incredibly powerful, healing time in my life. And it's energized me to participate in what's happening, which is like being able to look around and finally not being like, oh, God will take care of that. God will take care of this over here. He's got his eyes on that person over there, and feeling like benevolently apathetic about the world. And instead being like, oh shit, no, I need to engage. I need to participate. I need to know what's going on, and not just what's going on with people who look like me, but with all people, because we're in this together. And so I have found religion, I have found spirituality in the complete absence of all of it. And it's in my humanity. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, and what I try to do with, the kinds of work that I do. trying to empower people with their own sense of self and autonomy and engaging with other people. Ooh, I like the commenter liked. I'm not even looking at the comments. I'm too afraid that there's trolls, so I'm just not even looking.
No, it's good. The comments are pretty positive.
Oh, good.
I wanted to ask you a couple of things. So you mentioned a bunch of things that are very, very interesting, which I want to comment on. But first, I want to ask you, with the whole church thing, and how the church or the religion teaches you that you're inherently sinful and you need to be fixed and you need God to fix you. What about being a woman? Is being a woman any part of that? Like, what's the church sort of perspective? I know I'll just tell you about Islam. Islam, obviously. Muslim women are sold a certain image of Islam, that Islam, I don't think usually people go so far as to say Islam is feminist. I mean, I think that's like almost taken like a joke nowadays, that some people say that, but like Islam gives equality, this sort of narrative is sold to Muslim women. And Islam gave rights to women that they never had. And it's true, actually, Islam did give some rights to women, but it also took a lot of rights away from women. For example, the right to divorce. A Muslim woman cannot divorce a man. A man can divorce a woman instantly just by saying divorce, and then he has a waiting period and he says it again. Or if he doesn't take her back in the 30 days, she's divorced. It's unilateral from the man to the woman. And this is Islamic law. So obviously, secular law would still apply if you're living in a non-Muslim country. You could be religiously divorced from your wife, but you'd still have to go and apply in the court and whatever, and have a waiting period and separation and all that. But like, if you're religiously divorced from your wife, you cannot stay with her. So you cannot be alone with her. She has to wear hijab in front of you and all that. So that still applies even today, even though we have secular laws. There's still the religious conception. So all of these things, a Muslim woman would inherit half of what her brother would inherit. So if I have a daughter and a son, the son gets 2 shares of my income when I die, and the daughter gets 1. She would get 1/3 and he would get 2/3, basically, right? He would get double what she gets. And Muslim women are told that the reason for this is because the brother is supposed to take care of her. So like, just give her this equal amount. Like, why does she need to ask him to, like, that doesn't even make sense, but that's what they're sold, right? So definitely, the perspective Muslim women have. And now the hijab has become a sort of empowerment symbol. It's like, I'm willing to say fuck you to men, and like, it's my beauty that's not what matters, it's what's inside. And it's changed completely, because originally the whole point of hijab was to reduce a woman's apparent sexuality so that she's not attractive to other men. And many Muslim women will admit this, but nowadays more and more I get pushback from people saying, like, Muslims saying, no, that's not what hijab means to me anymore. I mean, not anymore. They're like, that's not what it means. It's just, part of my culture. It's part of my identity. It's not about what men think. It's for myself. And it's changed a lot, right? It's totally changed. But still, in the religious teachings themselves, there's a lot of negativity towards a woman. So much so that the companions of Prophet Muhammad, like the female companions, actually complained to him and said, how come there's always verses revealed for men and there's nothing for women? And then after that, there was a verse revealed that a woman, a Muslim man or a Muslim woman, they're both equal in righteousness, and in front of God, they're both equal, even though she doesn't get the same rights and status and all that men get in Islam, like the inheritance, the divorce, and so many things. I can go on and on. How is Christianity, and what is Christianity to you? What were you taught about being a woman in the church, and your value compared to men and stuff like that? Like, what is that?
Well, so I'm not very educated on Islam, and what I do here is a range of impressions, like what you've shared with me. And then I know some people who are advocates of Islam, who are more moderate and who espouse a feminist view of Islam too. So I've heard all kinds of things. So it's interesting to hear another viewpoint. I can't speak to Islam. You're not asking me to speak to Islam, but I'm just saying it's very interesting to hear your experiences with it. For Christianity, for the kind of Christianity that I grew up in, I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is that, like I mentioned, I was born in '82. And so I came of age, mid 90s, I graduated from high school in 2000. And for Christianity at that time, or evangelical Christianity at that time, there was a big push for something called purity culture. I don't know if that's something that you all are familiar with, but for us, it was an emphasis on virginity. an emphasis on heterosexuality, an emphasis on monogamy. And so there were books out there. There were renowned people that the church encouraged you to read their books about, like not having sex until you get married. And when you do get married, it's with a man. And when it's with a man, it's this particular way, and you're never supposed to get divorced. And so that is the narrative that I got. And I started hearing that story, 14 or 15 years old. And for me, the way I experienced it was that I had crushes on every single guy I met. Like I was like Tina from Bob's Burgers. If anyone watches her, she is a fantastic representation of when we allow a woman to be sexual on TV. Like she's this adorable character who's just like boy crazy. And so I was boy crazy. But I had this low self-esteem that was reinforced further by the Christian narrative about being a terrible person, not having any representation of women in the Bible. If there were, they were sluts, and all they did was maybe like help some dudes get some stuff done. Yay. So like I didn't get very positive, empowering messages about women. I got messages about my genitals being something that could be dirtied, about my body being something that could be dirty, about needing to be a certain way for men. We would pray for our future partners, our future husbands. We would pray for them and pray that they would be able to resist sexual temptation until we met them. Like crazy shit. And the weirdest part is I loved it. I loved it because I didn't have to deal with it anymore. I didn't have to emotionally mature or mature with the society. I didn't have to get to know or engage with or develop any interpersonal skills to talk to people that I was interested in. I could just be like, Jesus is taking care of this. So I was able to step away and feel like I was being active in finding a partner because I was just letting God have control. But in the meantime, I'm ingesting all these narratives around like, if I get touched, I'm sinful. If I have sex before marriage, I'm sinful. And guess what? That doesn't go away. It might not go away. So those messages are still shit that I have to deal with every day, because the kinds of things you're told as a child before you can think critically are the hardest things to get rid of. Mm-hmm. And so I understand like that a lot of women like myself got those messages, a lot of focus on being dirty. They would even do presentations about it. They had this thing where they would take like, construction paper, like that colored paper. They would take a piece of construction paper and say, this is you and this is your boyfriend and you guys are dating and you guys decide to have sex. And so they would put glue on one piece and they would put them together like this, and they, let it dry a little bit as they're continuing to talk. And then they're like, and then, you guys part and you decide to break up, and they try to rip it apart. Yeah. But by then you've got little specks of the construction paper on one side and specks of the construction paper on the other side. And this was this terrifying thing that you go into this relationship and there's no way you can exit it being whole unless it's monogamous, heterosexual, after you're married, like under the sheets, like there's this whole way you have to do it if you don't want to lose yourself. There was this big thing about like, if you don't do this right, you are going to lose your identity. You're going to lose your worth. You're going to lose your wholeness. And I ate into that. Which is ironic because isn't it in Christianity you can't divorce? So you actually get stuck like glue if you go by the church. Whereas if you don't go by the church, you have options, eh? Yeah. Don't tell them that though. What you said is it resonates with me. What you said about the whole like purity culture. I mean, this is a big thing for Muslim. I have Muslim friends, ex-Muslim friends that like one of my friends is a Pakistani guy. And he told me that, this guy didn't get married. He's in his 20s. He struggles with this too, because he was always taught that you can't talk to women. And he grew up in this, sort of like he's going to have an arranged marriage. And
and now he's in the US studying, but like he can't talk to women. He just can't. He's just like terrified. And every time he tries, it just comes across very awkwardly. And so those skills of just like, you know, and even in Canada, I feel like many Muslims would have this problem because like me, I put my kids in Islamic school when I was Muslim, and I was paying a hell of a lot of money, like $10,000 a year to put my kids in Islamic school. They were young enough, so they were still mixing boys and girls. But like, if I would have continued it, they would have been in high school completely separated. Like the boys are in one. I don't know how they do it, if it's boys on one side of the class or if they just have completely different classes for boys. I think there's still guys and girls, but there's a separation, and you're not supposed to talk to the girls and girls are not supposed to talk to the guys. So like you said, you just feel like, okay, I don't need to worry about this. It's easier. I'm just not going to talk to men or women or whatever, and you know, whatever. But then when you get older, now you've been shielded for so long that you don't know how to cope with this anymore, and you don't know how to deal with the normal sort of interactions of like the whole mating process, right? Which is a very human, and you know, when it comes to that, it's the social skills that are the most important more than anything else, right? It's like little cues you need to be able to, from a man's perspective, you need to know how to read a woman. You need to be able to understand what to say, how to say it, how to talk to her, and not to be crass, like when you read corny pickup lines, you can't use those to pick up women unless you're doing it from a level of confidence that you understand that this is going to come across in a way that's so dumb that she's going to laugh at it. You know what I mean? Like you got to be smart enough to do that. And unfortunately,
can I unpack that just like a little bit? Because like what I hear you saying reminds me of the movie Hitch.
I haven't seen it.
Which is the most fucked up movie with Will Smith and that other dude, where basically Hitch, this guy, teaches and facilitates other guys being able to connect with women that they don't have social skills to connect with.
Okay.
And it's a game. It's a fucking game. It's not a game. That's the thing. Like for me, where I am, how I'm seeing things right now is this isn't a game.
Yeah.
Like I don't need you to like rehearse how to talk to a woman. I don't need you to do any of that stuff. I want to be treated as a person. I just want to I want someone to show up, have no pretense about who they think that I am or what is it we're going to do together, but show up and say, I see you. Let's talk about this. Let's see, who are you? Like, and I think that personally, I think that's the better skill.
Yeah.
To show up to someone and be open to view whatever their humanity is instead of playing games, which can perpetuates the idea of objectifying us as if we're some kind of toy, like a bop it, slap it, like that if you do it right, you're going to win and like a bunch of vaginas are going to come out. Like it's not, it's not how it works. We just, you know, everyone's just people.
Yeah.
And I think the better skill then is just treating people as people and being open to learning who that person is before deciding if you want to mate with them in the first fucking place, let them be who they are.
There's definitely a different skill involved in talking to women versus talking to men. Like when I'm talking to guys, I couldn't necessarily just talk the same way to a woman if especially, and you do see that when you're dating, there's a certain facade that's created, which is not necessarily a good thing, but it's part of the mating process, I think, where, like people put posing for the photos, you put a certain image, you don't want your roles to show, you're trying to like put the light in a certain way. And I do feel like there's a little bit of, obviously at some point, the games end and you have to be authentic with the person, because that's what the goal is eventually, is to show yourself to another person is, I think, the definition of intimacy, to expose yourself. I mean, so, clearly, obviously those games, as you put it, are not going to be effective in the long run for a happy relationship. But yeah, that's definitely not what you want to do. But I'm just saying, in terms of like socializing and learning how to interact with the opposite sex is a valuable skill that needs to be learned from an early age, I think. I mean, because I think like what you said is when you're separated in this way and you have this purity culture, you tend to see the other person, the other sex as a prize, like you said. And it's no longer about just honest communication and getting to know the person, but it's like, well, how do I get this prize, right? And then the whole thing is the whole perspective is warped, right? So yeah, I do agree with that. And like I said, I do think now, what I've noticed though is that like arranged marriages actually solve this problem a little bit, which is kind of funny. Like I have a friend, I'm not going to say who it is, obviously, who is kind of overweight, and I don't think he ever would have had a relationship with anybody. He's Muslim, but like liberal, like doesn't care about dating or whatever. And he managed to get married to a wonderful woman from Pakistan. I mean, his parents took him back there, and I don't think he ever would have married someone here. I mean, I don't think he ever would have found anyone, because he's not like, he's big. He's like really big. And so in a funny way, you know, religion does deal with this problem. And it's not, obviously arranged marriages are probably not common in Christianity, are they?
Oh, no, not really. No,
Not at
it's
all. Okay.
very if anything.
Well, whereas with,
I think what you're getting at is like that there's different definitions of marriage. There's different definitions for partnership. And I think that's the beauty of what I'm trying to say. Like, this is DIY. This is do it yourself. Like, what do you want your relationship to be? Do you want a relationship that's built on a business of making a family and living together and doing life together more than anything else? Like, is a priority less that you should be attracted to each other, and the higher priority is building a family? Because that's what I see. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's a good way to put it.
In the culture of arranged marriages, it is more focused on the business, and that's why I don't ascribe to the belief that a marriage is a business. I don't ascribe personally to marriage at all. I ascribe to consciously being in a relationship. If it works, then do it, and then in choosing the things that you want to be in that relationship. It can involve sex, it can involve marriage, it can involve sharing finances, it can involve, retiring together, living together. These are all things that are presumed for marriages and for relationships, but you don't have to have them all. And so when we look at an example like your friend who found a happiness, a contentment in a marriage that was arranged, it's because they prioritized something that in mainstream culture is a priority, where you need to be fucking hot. And when I mean hot, I mean that you have to adhere to the main cultural standard for what bodies look like, which is bullshit, because there are people who are attracted to your friend. There are people who are attracted to your friend. And part of the problem here is our culture telling us what we are allowed to and not allowed to be attracted to. But just, like, we can build our relationships however we want to, whatever works. And so I'm glad that your friend found something that works for him.
Do you not feel though that like attraction is biological? Like it's based on certain evolutionary sort of, let's say, markers. For example, with certain things that would to men would be a sign of good genes. For example, like there's a book I read where he said, for example, having clear skin and certain body shape, these things, when men see these things, they in the back of their mind, they're not thinking, oh, she's going to make good babies for me, but like it's kind of hardwired in us that we're looking at it from the perspective of reproduction, even if you're not consciously thinking like that. It's hardwired in our brain, because at the end of the day, we are survival machines and reproduction machines. And the whole theory of the selfish gene is that our genes have been selected for reproduction, right? I mean, I'm the result of thousands of generations of my parents getting laid, right? Like being successful in getting a partner. And so they had to all be hot, right? For your theory to check out. All of your ancestors must be hot. Well, whatever defines hot. I mean, whether it was
right.
They have, like, for example, but even then, like when it comes to, I mean, and things are changing so much nowadays, but like traditionally, a man that had either high status or a lot of money, that would have been a good bet for a woman. And we're talking about in like ancient societies where women wouldn't necessarily be working or whatever. A partner that has money or status would be a good evolutionary bet. Whereas for the man, he's not looking for that, because a woman, he wouldn't be looking at status. It could be because it depends on culture. Again, you're right. I guess it depends so much on the culture, because there's also matriarchal cultures where the women are in charge, and although that's less common, but yeah, in that case, it'd be a totally different ball game, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's a blend of nature and nurture, right? Like we're trying to make it into some kind of binary and it's not.
Yeah.
And sexuality is more on a spectrum than we want to think. And like for me, when I was growing up, if you put my attraction on a bell curve, it would pretty strongly point towards liking dudes and
Yeah.
typically white dudes.
Yeah.
But as I grow and develop my humanity and my sense of connection to humanity, I find that I'm attracted to more people, more genders, more aesthetics. Anyone. Now I'm at a place where I'm like, I can't tell you what I am. If you're curious whether I'm attracted to you, I can tell you and probably not if you have to ask, but
Yeah.
to allow ourselves, like, I think to some extent, we have to unpack cultural narratives. And I don't say that to gaslight anyone. Like if anyone's like, well, fuck you, I'm straight. How dare you question me? Like, I'm not saying that. I'm speaking only from my experience that once I started to unpack how I had been socialized in my religion, in my culture, that it excluded, like in my neurons never even thought to look at a particular kind of person before. And in learning how I was socialized, unpacked that, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, no, okay, I see some more attractive people now.
Yeah.
Because I can relate to more people. I feel more human. I feel freer to allow myself to feel these things about different people. And so I think it's more complicated than you want to think. I don't think you're just born wanting to fuck people who look like they can make babies. I think you just want to, do whatever you want to do with whomever you want to do it, and trying to make it binary and simple is a denial of humanity. And it's a huge problem right now. That's a narrative that a lot of people are trying to put out there, that it's just, it's just this binary thing.
Yeah.
And that you just like people because they're going to make babies. And that's not true, because like there's all kinds of people with all different kinds of body types that are getting laid all the time, because we're all attracted to a diverse set of things. And some of us who aren't, it might be because of how we were socialized, that we're too scared to allow ourselves to even explore that. And again, I don't say that to gaslight you. So if you or anyone else, so don't take it personally. I have to speak again from my own experience.
We're definitely sharing perspectives here. And that's a good point too. Like the whole thing about sexuality being binary, it's problematic because it misses the whole. I think religion in general just misses the whole concept of homosexuality being something perfectly fine. I mean, and it goes back to, again, what is the goal of religious morality? I think in many ways, the goal of religious morality is to facilitate the growth of the religion, right? I don't know why they thought homosexuality was so bad, whether it was considered unnatural or something, because we know it's natural. We know that people are like 4 or 5% of the population or whatever are gay for whatever reason, whether it's genetics or a combination of genetics and upbringing or epigenetics. I mean, I think we're still trying to figure out exactly what that is, but whatever the case is, for whatever reason people are gay, they're gay. And frankly speaking, what's wrong with that? I mean, why does God have a problem with that? I think from the perspective of religion, you want to promote people having more babies because you want to grow the church. And frankly, that's what we see. We see the biggest religions are the evangelical ones. Islam, Christianity are dominating the numbers game because they have a lot of kids, right? And so we're in a world now where atheists, would be eventually outnumbered, because unless people keep deconverting or people become more agnostic, which is what I'm hoping, but like Islam is growing in terms of, Muslims are growing in terms of raw numbers, to the point where estimates like Pew polls are showing that there's going to be some, I think 2 to 3, is it 2 billion Muslims in the world at some point? I mean, it's going to be the number one religion. And that comes from the fact that Muslims tend to have more kids. Muslims tend to have kids, right? You know what I mean? Because the religion teaches you this, right? This family-centric sort of model, like you were saying, where attraction is maybe less important, but the relationship is sort of seen as a transaction to build the family and all that. And so, we need to, I think this is why we need to keep speaking about these things, because the whole the world that we live in is influenced by the type of people that are in it. And if religious motivations are king, we're going to be at the point where there's going to be so many religious people in the world. And so we need to continue talking about these things so that we continue sharing, you know, a more open-minded perspective. It's fine for there to be lots of religious people in the world. There's no problem with that. That's been the history of humanity since forever. But we do need, you know, secularism. We do need people to understand that, you know, your rights end where my rights begin.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's okay if you don't want to be gay. I mean, it's not even really, I think, an option, but like, if people want to see it that way, it's like, if I'm gay, that's my thing. That has nothing to do with you. If you don't like it, that's whatever. I don't care if you don't like it. That's just me and that's just you. You don't have a right to tell me that I can't do this. Because everyone has their own, like, you know, lines they need to draw in the sand, where it's like, your rights end where my rights begin, you know?
Yeah. That brings up for me, like, the theme of objectivity. I've been reading White Fragility by Dr. Robin DiAngelo, where she unpacks white fragility and white privilege in a racist world. And part of what has blown my mind is understanding how I was socialized as an American, as a white American, being in a white supremacist country. I never really realized that there was a particular way that I was being raised and educated about the world around me. I never realized that there was a framework that was being built around me. And one of the things that she pointed out in there is one of the values that America is espousing is this idea of objectivity, that we are capable of being objective, or really around white people, that we can consume information objectively, that we are individuals, that this is a meritocracy, that you get what you put in, that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And if you don't get pulled up by your bootstraps, then that's on you, and that's your fault, and that's not the fault of the system. But the point is that what concerns me is that evangelical Christianity and a lot of other religions like it don't believe in objectivity. They embrace their worldview as objectively true. And so they just can't. And I say this as someone who used to think this way. I could not allow myself to allow others to live their life the way that they wanted to live it, because it was morally wrong. And there is no I'm not being subjective here. This is objective truth. And so I can't vote in favor of marriage equality because it's a sin. I don't know what to tell you. It's not right. Like, you can sin all you want, but I'm not going to vote in favor of it. And so that's what concerns me about a lot of cultural narratives right now, about thinking that we've got it figured out. Like, I really appreciate any religious person I come across who's like, here's what I think. I could be wrong, but this is kind of the conclusions that I've come to. But I don't run into a lot of people who do that, who are like, I could be wrong. Like, I never said I could be wrong, but Jesus died for you on the cross. like you have to be 100% sure of yourself.
We need more people to be less certain of their positions. We want more people to be agnostic, not just in belief, but in general about their positions. And it's okay to be uncertain, but I think a lot of us are not comfortable with being uncertain. We just want to be 100% certain on everything. And I think you're right. I mean, we want people to be more like, for example, if more people are, uncertain, completely certain about Islam, then maybe they'll still be Muslim, but then they'll be, more okay with like gay rights, or like, getting a mortgage and buying a home for their family. I know one guy, for example, I spoke to he didn't leave Islam, but like after talking to me, he's like, hey, I bought a house I had a daughter and I bought a house. And I'm like, good for you. I'm like, what about the whole mortgage being haram, forbidden thing? He's like, yeah, but I need this for my daughter. And I'm like, that's a good decision, because you're still doing what you think is best for you and your family. And the religious sort of justification, he's okay with, he's a little bit feels guilty about it, but like he's okay with it, which I think is better for the world. If everyone can kind of prioritize this life a little bit more rather than the next life, then we'll have a better world. What you said, which I didn't get to, this whole thing about God will take care of it, and I'm just going to leave it. I think that's a good point. That's an excellent point, that sometimes religion makes you just leave a bad situation alone and not fix it, because you're like, well, God's gonna fix it, or this is what life is temporary, I don't really care, God's gonna destroy the whole world anyways, so why bother fixing it? The end of time is coming, Jesus is gonna come back. Or in the Islamic case, well, even in Islamic case, Jesus is gonna come back, because Muslims Muslims believe Jesus is coming back as well. And he's gonna break anyways, I won't get into that, but so everyone's like waiting for the end of the world. Thankfully, most Muslims don't think like that, and they do continue living productive lives. The majority of Muslims are not that religious, and I'm really happy for that. Like, my Muslim family doesn't even really. I told my mom when I converted to like the strict Orthodox Islam, I'm like, you shouldn't have a mortgage, you shouldn't be working for this company, and she's like, what are you talking about, boy? Like, get out of here. And she's like, I'm not selling my house, I'm keeping this place. Like, and I'm like glad she did now, because now I'm like, oh my God, that was such bad advice I was giving her, right? But I thought it was good advice at the time, right? So I think thankfully most Muslims are like that. The fundamentalist sort of thing is happening too, and I think that's where the pushback needs to happen, either from like ex-Muslims or like less religious, I mean, like moderate, I don't even know what to call them, like liberal Muslims. But in general, I think it's good. Like in America now, stats show that American Muslims are more accepting of LGBT rights than evangelicals, more than 50%, I think, which is hilarious, right? Like surprising. But I wanted to ask you though, you said white supremacist country. Do you think America is a white supremacist country? Like, even with like Obama being elected?
Did you see what we did?
I mean, yeah, but I mean, Obama was elected. I mean, how is that a white supremacist country?
No. And you know what? I can speak to this a little bit, but I'm still educating myself, being raised, white in this country. There's a lot I have to get educated on, but we are absolutely a white supremacist country, and Christianity has facilitated it. We murder. That's the first thing we did when we got here. We're like, you're brown, you're dead. Yeah. Okay, we need some people to make us rich. So we're just going to steal some brown ones and some black ones from over here. And they're going to just fucking build our goddamn White House. And then we're going to build, and then we're not going to compensate them for anything. We're not going to let them vote. And then when we do say that they're people, they have to stay separate from us. And now when we say that they can be with us, we're going to make it impossible for them to be able to afford the neighborhoods that we're in. We are systematically racist. And it is reflected in our leadership. The most powerful groupings that we have are more than 85 to 100% white people. White people. And white people can't possibly know and speak to and address the concerns of brown and black people and indigenous people in this country, because we don't know what it's like. I fucking just figured it out a month ago that this country is still white supremacist, and we've always been white supremacists. And the biggest lie is that we are not there. And it's not like all of us are going out and like burning crosses on people's lawns. Like, that's the big misconception, that racism is overt, violent behavior or disgust or intolerance of a brown, black, or indigenous body. But it's systematic, and it's these subconscious ways that we see people, the way that we refer to that neighborhood over there as ghetto or urban or, crime ridden or whatever. It's all these like subtle ways that we describe what is racism. Mm-hmm. And for us to deny it makes it continually be perpetuated, because we benefit from it. White people benefit from it, so we don't see it. And so we allow it to continue. And so we continue to be the ones in charge, and we continue to be the ones that set policies that have white people in mind, whether not usually explicitly, but like subconsciously, because that's how we are indoctrinated in our culture to value white experiences over other experiences.
Mm-hmm. I want to push back against that just a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Just to give my perspective. Now, my perspective is Canada, so not American. I think we're way better off than you guys in some ways.
Yes, you are.
But just to share my experiences in Canada.
Yeah.
So we have the same problem with natives, like bad treatment of natives in general, and the government is sort of compensating them for that, I think, because natives get preferential tax benefits and they don't have to pay tax, and there's different things they get. And there's still a problem though, because we know a lot of native women were murdered, and to this day there's still like an investigation, and there's a lot of things that are not perfect in Canada. But
yeah,
Canada and the US in general are places in the world that a lot of people would just love to come, compared to what the experiences in other parts of the world. For example, in Iran, in Saudi, like the racism there is not just covert, it's overt. Like I've been to Saudi, you're brown over there, like you are just like second class. It doesn't, until you show your passport, and you have a Canadian passport, again, instantly you're no longer brown. But like if they see you as brown, the first thing they say is Pakistani, you're Pakistani, basically. And you're treated like a maid or a servant, even if you're just like at the airport or whatever. It's like Saudis are gods over there compared to like the brown people. Like they can harass, intimidate, do whatever they want to other people openly. Like there's not even like they don't even pretend like they're not racist. They're just openly racist. And, Iran, and, even I think that in other parts of, now Kenya, I don't think is like that. I mean, I lived in Kenya until I was 8. So maybe I don't know exactly, but I think it's pretty good overall. When I came to Canada as an immigrant, we came with very little money in our pockets, and obviously my parents were just doing like typical jobs. They weren't highly educated either. I was able to get into a good university, and I was able to succeed in my field. I never felt like I was being openly discriminated as a Muslim, as a brown guy. I had a big beard, much bigger than I do now. Anyone that saw me, one guy said he thought I was an Orthodox Jew because I had like such a big beard, and I was like laughing at that. He said from behind, he saw my face, he knew I was Muslim, but like from behind, he's like, I thought you were Jewish. And so it would have been easy to discriminate me, but I did have, one of the benefits I had is I got into a good university and I had a good education. But the fact that I was able to go from, being an immigrant to succeeding, and I think one of the other kind of biases I have is I'm in the tech industry. So the tech industry tends to be more meritocratic than like other blue collar jobs. Plus, so, in my case, we don't really, in the tech field, there's probably more of a bias towards hiring women, and there's less women in STEM in general anyways. But like in terms of like the color of your skin, people don't really see that as much. And so, like there's a lot of like if you look at even Yahoo, or, you have the freaking like Indians were running the company, right? And so I do agree that sometimes when you're coming as an immigrant, you're already highly qualified. So it's a different situation being Black in America and living in, certain areas and having to deal with all of this systemic racism, as you mentioned, and the fact that they were persecuted, and, there's a lot done to Black people in America, and they have to deal with that now, compared to coming as an immigrant on a highly qualified visa program or whatever. Again, it's a totally different experience for me. Yeah. In my case, I was kind of in the middle because we weren't highly qualified. We were sponsored by my cousins or whatever. But I did feel like Canada is pretty meritocratic in general, because at least based on my experiences, and it's not like that for everybody. So I don't want to put down what other people have experienced and the racism they've suffered. But I do think we have a lot to be thankful for in the West. And it's only when you kind of travel outside of your country that you see just how bad it can get. And in some ways, I feel like it's because we've made so much progress that we can complain so much, and we can still improve. There's always room for improvement, but we should always keep in mind that we have a lot to be thankful for over here. And I'm saying that as a brown person, like, and as someone that was Muslim, right? Like, I didn't feel like that was used against me. And again, that's my personal experience. I can't say that's true for everybody, but that's just my 2 cents. It's just that we should be thankful as well for, and I do see that people, especially white people, are trying so hard not to be racist, especially now. Whereas in general, I think, like I said, the racism is very covert over here. It's like, maybe if you had 2 candidates you were hiring, one of them was brown, one of them was white, you might feel more comfortable with the white guy. And if you're white, and you'll be like, okay, I'll hire that guy. But it's at the point now where some of the schools where my kids go, there's more brown people than white people. And so it's almost like whites are becoming a minority in certain areas, especially in the the metropolitan areas like Toronto and, some of the bigger cities. there's a lot of immigrants, right? And so, and then the immigrants stay, they stay and they have bigger families, and now you're in a situation where there's more brown people than white people. I mean, it's kind of like weird, right? You know what I'm saying? Like in my high school, and this was back in the 90s, there was a handful of white people in my school, and that was back in the 90s. Now it's like, it's even it's even worse, right? So I think I hope that a point will come where we don't look at people based on the color of the skin. I do think it's a very complicated issue. I do think there's still lots of improvement that we need to make, and all that. But yeah, that's my rant.
Oh yeah. I appreciate you sharing that with me, of course. And I find your experience to be valid because it is your experience. And so I can't speak against that at all. I mean, all I can contribute is what I've heard at protests and from reading what I have been reading over time, which is that there's a spectrum of white adjacent that makes life easier for you, depending how white you can act. And I'm saying this from books. I'm not speaking from myself. I'm saying it from what I've been reading from Robin DiAngelo. But like the closer you are to whiteness, the less shit you're going to get from the system. And the tech field is from what I know, is very friendly to people of color. And I've been told that the experiences for brown people, for I don't know how the right word is for it, but for brown bodies in the country is different for Black people, which you totally acknowledge. And I appreciate what you're saying in terms of like, there's some space for gratefulness in terms of like, we're not as bad as like what you're mentioning about your experiences in Saudi. And that's fair. And I'm hearing from people, just down the street who are saying that they are afraid they're going to be shot every single time they're pulled over, I mean, if you look into all the Black people who have been killed over the last decade, they're doing all kinds of day-to-day things, having a barbecue, sleeping in bed,
driving,
going for a run, bringing home some Skittles, and then they're shot. And so I hear what you're saying in terms of like some things look like they're equal and more better, and like statistically looking at more brown bodies being in a school versus white bodies could feed that confirmation. But it's a systemic thing. Like it's, well, what kind of housing opportunities do they have? How are they being treated by the police? Like it's a thing that's inherent in everything that we have going on for us. And if they get thrown into jail for something, are they going to receive higher penalties for that versus a crime that a white person commits, which is like embezzling billions of dollars from an organization? So there's still like these systemic issues that are weighted against, again, speaking from what I've been reading, not from my own knowledge, that Black people tend to be in poverty because of this systemic racism. And if you're in poverty, you don't have the luxury of choosing your morality. And so you might have to do certain things in order to survive and to take care of your family. And when you do those things, you're over penalized in a racist criminal justice system. And so I don't say all this to counter any of your experience. I think that there's a variety of experience for everyone in all of our nations. But I did kind of want to just echo that back, that's kind of what I've been hearing. And I certainly am not okay with being just thankful that Black people don't have to work for free anymore. I certainly demand that they not be shot. I certainly demand that they feel safe, that they should feel safe calling the cops if they have problems. Yeah. And they are not unilaterally, but by and large, thank you. Learn English, Marie. By and large, that is the experiences that I'm hearing that they're having. And I mean, and I guess maybe we're probably both okay with this, with saying, let's celebrate, we've come forward a bit, we've done some work here, and let's hold at the same time the need for so much better. And I don't feel like I need to split my mind into, you know, and like be like, oh, well, it's okay. This is okay because it's so much better.
No,
Like, no,
that's a
I
bad.
demand so
Yeah.
much more.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we can't say, I mean, that's the stupidest thing ever. And that's whataboutery. When someone says, oh, but what about blah, blah, blah. And like, why, like I think the all lives matter thing is so stupid. It's just like, yeah, we know all lives matter. Nobody's saying like Black Lives Matter doesn't mean all lives don't matter. Like geniuses, like that's not what it means. I think a big problem with America is the gun issue. I think the gun issue is making all of these things amplified. When a police officer doesn't know, like they don't know if you have a gun, and that just makes the whole situation way more tense and unnecessarily so. Like everybody's walking around fully loaded there. I mean, they're not, but I mean,
the only people that had guns at a protest that I went to the other day,
yeah.
I was at a protest outside of our governor's mansion. It was a protest led by Bikers for 45, which is a biking group that is literally their whole theme is that they love Trump. And so they hosted a rally outside the governor's mansion, pro cops, you know, let's support our police, blah, blah, blah. The only people that were carrying at that outside of the police was their side.
I don't mean a protest. I mean when a police is interacting with like a 911 call, or like he's approaching someone that there's some issue, domestic violence, or whatever the case, a break and entry, or you know, when they're dealing with a situation like that compared to Canada, it's just that much less likely that the person's holding a gun. Like when someone calls 911 and comes to your house in Canada, 99% of those people don't have guns. Whereas in America, the police is walking into a situation where there's potentially guns there, and that just makes the whole situation way more tense, and it just makes police way more trigger happy because it's either them or the police. That's probably what they're thinking. Right? And I'm not saying this. Yeah. I'm saying that if you solve the gun problem, I think a lot of the other problems will also go away, because that's just making the situation like so dangerous for everybody. You know what I mean?
I mean, you're not wrong, and then I'm sure that's a contributing factor, because it's opening the possibility for it to greatly escalate easily. So I'm sure that's an issue that needs to be resolved, but I certainly don't think it's the biggest one. I definitely think that well, I mean, how police are trained.
Oh yeah,
because they're not just killing Black people, they're killing white people. They're overreacting. And they see the world in a militant view, the way that if you read any articles on how former cops have explained how they were educated in their training, they're very much seen, like they're taught to see the world in black and white, good, evil, us against them. And so if they're going into these scenarios, that's how they're going to view things. And if they're mostly white people, then they're going to have implicit bias. And we all have implicit bias. We all do. And so if it's all white cops and we are unfairly, sorry, I got distracted by the nice comment. Oh, thank you. I haven't been watching the comments at all because I knew I'd get distracted, but I appreciate all the comments that are out there that are positive.
Thank you.
But if we are overly targeting Black people, then those implicit biases are going to play out and they're going to be affirmed. And so this is a really a large, complex issue. And America seems like, at least the people I'm hanging out with, seems like this is the fucking time to deal with it and to change these systems and to get people of color into positions of power and to invite them to the table for conversations for in the legal sense, in the power sense, and for white people like myself to really start doing the work to get educated on something that we can't possibly relate to and certainly haven't probably noticed on our own. Because we've been protected, we've benefited from the system. I realized the other day when I was reading this book, I was like, I grew up segregated. Like I never thought about that. I was like, I grew up segregated. Everyone I knew was white.
The neighborhoods, you mean?
Yeah, my neighborhoods were mostly white. There was a few token, maybe Asian people, maybe a token Black person, but like all white people at church, all white people at school, all white people in my neighborhood, all white teachers. All of my education has been white teachers. Like, how are you gonna see the world differently? And then the only media or the only information that you consume about brown, indigenous, black bodies is the stories that have been spun by white people about those people, or movies that have been written by white people about those people and their views of it. And so subconsciously we are eating up these narratives and develop these implicit biases about people that we don't even have any exposure to. So segregation is a contributing factor towards white people developing implicit bias that, if we get a gun in our hands, is going to make us incredibly dangerous and produce this problem of police brutality and racism.
Mm-hmm. So very, very good points. Before we kind of,
you need to do an ad for your show.
I forgot to do that. Yeah.
Thumbs up, everyone. Thumbs up.
Web is watching. Thank you so much. To everyone that has especially been supporting me. Thank you for the donation intro. Solitary Emmy, thank you for your support and for being a member. And to anyone else who's not a member, you need to join now. I most appreciate all of your support, and I think that we're doing some really good stuff on the show here. We're getting some really good exposure and ideas. I'm almost at 50,000 subscribers. Yay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it came. I feel like, using the shock and awe approach would probably get me up there faster, but would also, give me a different crowd. And I don't want that crowd. I don't want the audience that's just looking for me to piss on religion, let's call it that. Looking for a more nuanced crowd, people that are interested in intellectual conversation. So if that's you, please do join the channel. For as little as $2 a month, you can keep this the lights on this channel. As you guys may know or may not know, one of my fellow atheist channels, Apostate Prophet, was completely demonetized all of a sudden on YouTube. And so that is kind of the trend with these left-leaning tech companies. So definitely I want to be nuanced. I want to keep fighting bigotry while also being critical of religion. That's my goal. While not throwing Muslims under the bus, we want to throw Islam under the bus, because I don't think Islam is good for the world. That's my opinion. So please do support me. And if YouTube doesn't work for you, you can check out Patreon. And for a wonderful guest, Millie, can you tell us more about what you're doing and where people can find you? And then we'll just get back to a few more things before we end off.
Yeah, absolutely. So the things that I have going on is that I host a podcast called Everyone's Autonomous, and you can see that at everyone'sautonomous.com. It's a podcast. Up till now, mostly I've just been interviewing ex-Christians. I would like to get some more diversity on there. So if people are listening and would like to talk about their experiences coming out of Islam, I would love to have you on. But I talk about people coming out of religion, and that in and of itself isn't anything novel. There's a lot of podcasts out there like that. But what I also try to do is talk then about this what I mentioned earlier, anthrobiological grounding, this reassimilation into the universe. Whether it's spiritual, physically, mentally, emotionally, becoming a part of the universe and getting involved in what's happening here, which usually means for me social justice awareness and involvement and advocacy. So that's Everyone's Autonomous, the podcast. And then I do life coaching work, which you can find at mariedelafont.com. And I do a number of different things on there. The thing that people seem to be the most intrigued about is that I coach people who are exploring non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy. So you can check that out there. And then lastly, I have a humanist photography company. I've been volunteering at the protests in Minneapolis for the last month and documenting what's been going on there. And so those are the three big things I've got going on. I don't think that most of you probably know the other people I work for. I work for Dave Warnock. He's somebody who used to be Christian, now is an atheist. Now he's dying of ALS, and he's on a speaking tour talking about dying as an atheist and as a former believer. So he's at daveoutloud.com. And so he's someone I work with a lot when there's not a pandemic. But those are really powerful conversations. If you have issues with mortality post, not having, what do you guys call your heaven? I can't remember.
Jannah.
Heaven. Jannah? Okay.
Yeah, that's the Arabic word for Jannah.
Oh, okay. Not having Jannah anymore.
Yeah, well, Jannah means.
Doesn't that mean go?
Jannah means garden, but it's meant to refer to the paradise, the garden of paradise or whatever. Yeah, in Arabic. Or they just say
I don't
heaven.
know if this is impressive to you at all, but I know some Hindi, which is
Oh,
not Arabic at all, but it's
yeah.
somewhat related.
I don't, this is not going to impress you, but I don't speak any other languages except English.
That's
Uh,
fair.
so yeah, so guys, do check out her stuff there, and subscribe to the podcast. Now, just to finish off and to kind of respond to some of the things you said, you made a very good point about de-escalation, about police violence and training. And the training, police need to learn martial arts. They need to learn how to physically, handle someone, how to not, de-escalation, right? Rather than like escalating from like to guns and shooting. Well, how about de-escalation? How about like talking them down and all of these things? So that's definitely a very good point. I 100% agree that police training needs to change. I don't know the first thing about that, but experts who are in the industry should get involved and we need to make these changes, right? What I wanted to ask you about was when you said you were, racially segregated, and the fact that you were in an all white community, and you talked about how, based on income levels and all of that, like in Canada, we have, let me see, it's like there's 2 to 4% blacks in Canada, and in America, according to what I just Googled, it's like 13%. So wouldn't we expect to see that, there'd be like in America, it'd be like 1 in 10 teachers would be black, for example, or like in Canada, I mean, there were a few black people in my school, but it was probably close to 4 or 5%, just like the stats show. Like, wouldn't that be normal? Like,
you should see that, right? But like what we're seeing though is that all black, no, not all. You're seeing neighborhoods that are all black.
Oh yeah, that's weird, right?
You're seeing neighborhoods who are almost exclusively white. And if you're black, you have a very different experience in that neighborhood than you do anywhere else. Well, I mean, to be fair, South Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered, is a pretty diverse area and has a lot of black population. But even there, they are subject to police brutality and racism. And so segregation is a thing, and it doesn't look like exactly what you would think like it looks like. 1 in 10 of your teachers then statistically, right, should be black.
Yeah.
1 in 10 of your classmates should be black. If that's the kind of statistics that we're holding to, but instead they're grouped off on average is what I've been reading.
And I'm just going to address this comment. It's kind of an aggressive comment. Anu Phillip left a $2 donation saying she's white and therefore evil. I don't think that's what she's saying. She's not saying white people are evil. She's saying
if you have a quote, if you want to pull back a quote from when I said that I'm evil, I would love to hear me say that. Because
you said you're evil based on Christianity. Not evil, but you said all people are sinful by definition based on Christianity, which is not.
Yeah, but I'm not Christian anymore. No, yes, I'm absolutely white. Yeah. I absolutely benefit from white supremacy. I am absolutely implicit in white supremacy within this country. Does that make me evil? That's a really great question. It does not. I don't feel shame. I feel awareness.
Yeah,
I feel motivation. I feel a need to be involved, to get educated. I don't really care about my ego at this point. My priority is justice. So this isn't about me and if I'm good or if I'm bad. This is acknowledging who I am biologically and socially and culturally. That I'm just woven into the fabric. I'm not evil. I just need to see who I am, where I am, how I've gotten here, and push to be a better human being. Somebody who's actively seeking out the perspectives of other people who are being oppressed by the fabric within which I have been woven and benefit from. So I'm not evil. Nope. I mean, first of all, there's no such thing as evil, in my opinion, but more so, that's beyond the point. But shame is not holding me back from being involved and getting educated and checking myself and admitting when I'm wrong. And I think that's a huge thing a lot of us should try to advocate for, to make justice your priority over your ego.
I mean, I think that's so well said. You don't feel shame, and nor should you feel shame, nor should you feel guilty about what your ancestors did, because they weren't you; it was someone else. We
But they
definitely
are
want
me, though. I was complicit in it too.
to.
I'm going to Mexico and trying to tell those people that they're wrong. Like, there's a lot of
That you're
subconscious
guilty of.
ways that I've participated in this by
Yeah,
being ignorant to it, by not looking at it, by ignoring Black Lives Matter for 4 years. I'm absolutely complicit in it,
yeah,
and I regret that,
yeah.
and I have no time to spend shaming myself over
Yeah, and
it.
you shouldn't. Like, shame isn't a healthy emotion. It doesn't
Right.
contribute to a better world. We definitely want to address these things. Stop Scamming Man made a good point that in America, schools get the funding from local property tax, guaranteeing the rich and poor areas get different experiences and very different opportunities. Yeah, it's the same thing here too. We get funding for schools based on local property tax, and obviously the area that I live, again, it's very multicultural, but it's the value of the houses are higher than some other areas. I'm just grateful that we don't, like, I haven't seen Black communities here. Maybe I'm just ignorant, but I mean, in the city, we don't have that issue here in Canada. And I'm grateful for that. I mean, it's pretty mixed overall. I do think that there's probably, like, when I was talking to my boss about this, because this whole idea of having, quotas for hiring, and I was saying, well, we have what, 2 to 4% of Black people. Like, that's what and he's like, yeah, and that's what we want to see. Like, that should be the goal. We should be proportionate to the number of the population, because right now apparently we don't even have that. I was surprised. I do think that sometimes this type of thinking can go too far, and I'm more in favor of fixing the systemic issues early on rather than at the level of hiring. And because I feel like rather than having quotas for women or people of color or whatever in terms of hiring, we should fix those problems with funding in the schools, in the education system, in the neighborhoods, so that they become just as qualified, and we don't have to worry about having quotas, because you don't want to be hiring you don't want to not be hiring the best person for the job, because that will have a negative impact on your society. We definitely want to hire the best people for the job, no matter what the color is, skin or sex or whatever it is. But like, if there's not enough women in STEM, in technology and science and whatever, then we want to encourage that. We want to invest in that. We want to fix that. Do you agree with that? Do you think that makes sense?
It's multifaceted. Yeah, I mean that's that's part of it for sure. But I mean, there's studies out there that show that people subconsciously pass on resumes that have ethnic sounding names. And this is an implicit thing. So you can't change a system and then expect implicit biases to change. And so something I advocate for is almost like, you know how we're all required to do a certain amount of history classes, but usually those history classes are about the white background. At least in America, it's always about the white side of the story of how America was founded. I feel like if when you're educated, you're required to understand what systemic racism is, then that's going to hopefully keep especially white minds woke to their implicit biases and affect the kinds of power and choices that they make as they become managers and supervisors, and then can hire people to constantly have the knowledge that you are racist. It's okay. It's okay. I'm racist. And so I just keep it at the front of my mind. Okay, I'm racist. I don't need to feel bad about it. I just need to be aware of it and keep my eye on it. And when someone points it out, be like, thank you. I like justice. I'm so glad that you educated me. So I think that, I mean, we can talk about the systems too, but I'm very much drawn to this like hearts and souls kind of thing of like needing to shift paradigms in people's minds to accept that you are not objective, accept that you've been socialized in a particular way to see people in a certain way. And so you can't be colorblind because the world is not colorblind. The systems are not colorblind. Yeah. And so I advocate for more conscious awareness of racism.
I think I don't like saying I am racist. I would rather say that I have racist tendencies rather than labeling yourself like that, because the same thing that you teach your kids, you don't call your thief, you don't call your son a thief or a liar. You don't say you're a liar. You say, well, you lied. because then it becomes part of the identity, right? If you say you're a racist, you're a racist, it feels like a kind of shaming tactic that, you know, you're a racist, rather than that's a racist thing to do. So just the framing of the term of you know, the thing, I would kind of just say it a little bit differently.
I can hear what you're saying, and I think I think that points at the difference of the definition of racism, because for a long time, white people have thought that racism, like I mentioned before, meant burning crosses on people's lawns, not being able to tolerate Black people, that kind of thing. Whereas racism is just a natural thing that's going to happen when all the people in power are of one identity. It's just going to happen. Racism is implicit bias backed by legal authority.
Okay.
And so if you put all of one kind of a person in charge, you're just going to have racism. That's just how it works. And so then if they dominate the country for 400 years or whatever, and you inherit that narrative and that the way the media presents normative things being white perspectives, then, I mean, you're going to be racist. So I understand what you're trying to say. Like, your goal is to open people's minds, right? And you feel like using the word racist is going to close their minds down. And I get that. And I advocate for redefining, for understanding what racism actually is, and taking the shame out of it. Just understanding that you're just kind of woven into this, and saying that you're racist does not mean that you go wearing a Ku Klux Klan hat. It's the most honest thing that I think that most white people can say. And you don't have to be ashamed about it, despite everything that you were told when you grew up, that you shouldn't be racist and that everything was about how not to be racist. You just are. Are. So let's talk about that now. But I understand what you're saying, that the semantics of it can make you feel bristly and kind of want to shy away from that. So, like, I won't double down on that, but I think more important is like the conceptual part of it, of like, what are we actually saying here? And more than just the word.
If racism is an implicit bias backed by legal authority, what about people that are just racist and are not backed by legal authority? Like, what if I'm anti-white?
They're prejudiced.
So if I'm anti-white, that's not racist?
No, because that's exactly what I'm saying. Because the modern definition of racism has to have legal authority behind it. It's just inherently that way. So when you talk about being a person of color who holds prejudice against white people, you're just prejudiced. But prejudice with legal authority is racism.
See, I always understood racism as being, I don't see any difference between, well, I'm trying to understand, there's a difference between prejudice and racist. So you're saying racism is a sort of systemic thing, and that's not usually how the word is used. Like, if someone says you're racist, I don't want my daughter to marry a Black man. Is that racist? Like, what if I said I want my daughter to marry a Black man? That's not racist? That's prejudice?
No, that's prejudice. Racist. That's an individual bias. Yeah. I know this is a semantics discussion.
Yeah.
And I guess in the end, I don't really care what we call these words, as long as we're focusing on the right thing. And that right thing being that, you know, I don't know how else to discuss it other than how I am, but that the racism is the legal authority.
Okay.
And so everyone has bias, everyone has prejudice. That prejudice is informed by the media and the culture, and like, we're all told it's better to be white than it is to be brown. It's better to be, man than it is to be white. We know the hierarchy here. And so when most of the authority in this country, whether it's the news sources, whether it's the people who approve what books are released, the people who direct the movies, the people who are in charge of the different government levels, when those are all statistically white men, the biases and the prejudice that they have, just like the rest of us have, since they're the ones with power and they're the only ones with power generally, that's where you're going to get racism. But I understand. So when we want to talk about like someone burning crosses on lawns, we're talking about, I mean, that's prejudice, but it also aligns with the system of white supremacy in that it's, white against Black or whatever.
Isn't it the difference between systemic racism and individual racism? Because I still feel like racism, I can be racist in my individual life, and I have power. I may not have like systemic power, like I don't run the world system, but like in my family, I have power to decide or to influence my daughter's decisions on who she marries, for example, or dates. I don't want you dating a black man, and that's racism. Why? Why don't you want me dating a black guy? Because he's black. Well, it's also, to me, it's racist. So to me, you're calling it prejudice, but it's to me, the way I look at it is that's racist, and systemic racism is at a higher level, but it's just the same thing, but at the power level has shifted. That's how I see it. I think prejudice is not necessarily racist in the way I see it. I see prejudice as a sort of like, let's say I don't like black people, for example, I might be prejudiced. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily racist. If I tell my daughter, don't date that guy because he's black, now I'm being racist. But if I just don't like him, I don't necessarily call that racist. I just think I have some sort of feelings that are not the best. But racism is when you actually implement that. Like, I agree with that part. I just don't agree with not calling that racism. Because I feel like, I guess it's semantics at the end of the day.
It is.
Way, whatever we call it.
Because I think I totally hear what you're saying. Like, I totally hear what you're saying. And for me, we're kind of bumping up on the edge of where my self-education journey is. So there's only so much further I can go to give input here. But the way that I look at it anyways is just like, I want to be able to talk productively about it. And to do that, we need to define things. And as it is right now, if we're calling people racist who are actually just white people who are unaware of white supremacy and systemic racism, and we're calling them racist, and that's, shutting down a lot of conversations and not representing things correctly. Like, I think it's just important to define what it is that we're talking about, because that whole racist word is really, really loaded, when really it's a very, very encompassing, broad thing. And to talk about biases and prejudice is more representative of what actually humanity is. But again, we're bumping up on the edges of my own education that I've been doing over the last month. But so I'll simply say, like, just if you're curious about how I've been discussing it, the semantics I've been using, that's something that I've been getting from sources such as White Fragility by Dr. Robin DiAngelo. In the end, it doesn't really matter what these words mean. It matters what they stand for and what they're conceptualizing. So getting caught in the semantics is taking away from the actual issue at hand. But it's still an important conversation to have in order to get people to buy in on having the conversation.
Yeah.
So all I'll say is just, like, if you're curious at all about what I've said, check out White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and she kind of constructs that and kind of helps you see how she's framing things. And it's a frame that I've heard on many different platforms around activism and social justice. So I know it's not just her, and it makes it more effective to talk about it. And if you do subscribe to those semantics, it extracts the shame from it, and it just lets it be. It just is what it is, and so let's deal with it now.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's a good place to end. Everyone, I've been speaking to Mary Delafont. You can check out her blog, her photography, and all that. Details will be linked in the description. I haven't done it yet, but I'll do that after the show. Mary, thanks for coming. This was a great, wonderful conversation. We diverged way off religion, but I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's good to talk about other things too, not just Christianity and Islam all the time, right?
Yeah.
And
they're all interconnected.
Yeah, they're all interconnected, and you definitely have a lot of hats on. You're doing a lot of things. So everyone, do check out her stuff. It's going to be linked in the description box. And thank you. And maybe we'll have another chat some other time.
Pleasure. I love it. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the viewers and all the comments that I didn't read.
Okay, everyone. It's been a good show, and we'll see you. Probably the next show is going to be on Thursday, live stream with Abdullah Gondal, and I'll announce that later. All the best. Bye bye.